They mocked her at the gallery. The black curator, they said, only got the job for attention. But when the Mafia boss they whispered about walked in, tattoos under a tailored suit, the whole room froze. He didn't need to defend her. He just looked once, and the laughter died. By sunrise, Milan remembered one name, Nia Ellis. The marble floors of the Museo di Cera gleamed like wet stone under the chandelier glow. Every camera flash bounced across paintings worth more than apartments, and the air carried that quiet arrogance only money could afford. Nia Ellis, the new curator everyone whispered about, drifted through the crowd with a calm that didn't match her heartbeat. She had spent months restoring this collection, centuries of dust, scandal, and forgotten names, but tonight wasn't about art, it was about perception. Waiters in white gloves passed champagne. The city's elite leaned in close to judge. "Remarkable hire," one patron said softly, glass tilted, "so international." They smiled like they were giving her a compliment, not measuring her difference. Nia smiled back, the kind that could slice without spilling a drop. Her midnight blue gown shimmered with movement. On her wrist, a museum badge, not jewelry. She was here to prove she wasn't decoration. 2 plainclothes guards stayed near the corner. Not for her, but because of who might arrive. Rumors said the exhibit's main benefactor would make an appearance, a man whose name carried both admiration and unease through Milan's undercurrent. Then the atmosphere shifted. A slow hush, a rearranging of shoulders as if the room inhaled at once. Alessandro Russo had arrived. Tailored black suit, no tie, posture precise. He walked as if silence followed him by habit. He didn't approach her immediately. He simply observed, letting her keep the spotlight she'd earned. That small act, a restraint so deliberate, did more to command the room than any entrance line could. She caught the flicker of camera lenses turning toward her, toward them. A whispered headline already forming. "The Curator and the Man Who Owns Half of Milan." She pretended not to hear. One of the donors stopped beside her, an older man with cufflinks shaped like crowns. "Tell me, Miss Ellis," he said with a knowing smirk, "how much of taste is instinct, and how much is influence?" The circle tightened, hungry for her stumble. For half a second, her mind flashed back to lectures where she'd been talked over, meetings where her words were rephrased by someone with a deeper voice. Not tonight. "Influence chooses what sells," she said evenly, eyes steady. "But taste, that's what survives after money moves on." The silence that followed was the cleanest sound in the gallery. Even the music paused for a beat before violins remembered their cue. The donor smiled, uncertain, and stepped back into the glow of someone else's approval. Across the room, Alessandro's expression barely moved, but his gaze said everything. Quiet respect, recognition, maybe danger. Nia turned toward the next group of guests when a ripple of laughter behind her broke the spell. Someone was threading through the crowd. Taller than most, glass in hand, smile too easy to be polite. Her stomach clenched before her mind caught up. Daniel Hart. The ex who knew both her and the version of her she'd buried. And, from the look on his face, he hadn't come to congratulate her. A murmur swept the floor, a slow tightening of curiosity, photographers lifting cameras again. She forced a breath, set down her glass, and braced for whatever truth he thought he was about to deliver. An uninvited past just walked into the one night she couldn't afford to lose. The crowd's laughter shifted, turning from champagne warmth to curiosity. Daniel Hart moved through the gallery as if he still belonged there. Perfect hair, practiced charm, the kind of confidence that came from mistaking old mistakes for new chances. Nia's fingers tightened around her clutch before she even looked at him. "Still curating storms, I see," he murmured, tone too casual to be friendly. "Daniel," she said evenly, "you weren't on the guest list." He smiled. "When has that ever stopped me?" A few heads turned. Lenses followed. He glanced toward Alessandro Russo standing across the room, deep in conversation but aware of everything. Daniel leaned closer. "Quite a patron you've chosen. People say he funds more than art these days." Nia's voice didn't rise. "People say a lot when they can't stand being ordinary." "Careful," he whispered. "Truth doesn't always look good under these lights." She stepped back before the scent of his cologne could drag her anywhere near the past. "Enjoy the exhibit," she said, walking away. But the moment had already rippled outward. Gossip didn't need context, only an audience. Two collectors whispered behind fans. A blogger typed something on her phone. And somewhere near the wine table, a smirk spread like spilled ink. Nia reached for calm. 1, 2, 3 measured breaths. This was her night, her work, her space. She had survived worse storms than an ex with loose lips. Still, the ache of humiliation crept beneath her ribs. A gentle voice cut through it. "Miss Ellis." She turned. Alessandro stood a few feet away, expression unreadable. "You all right?" Her chin lifted. "Perfectly. Nothing a mop and a refund can't fix." He almost smiled, a flicker gone as soon as it appeared. "I could have him escorted out." "No," she said quickly. "Let the art do it." He studied her for a long second, then nodded once. "Then I'll stay where you can see me." That line wasn't flirtation. It was strategy, respect wrapped in reassurance. The crowd seemed to sense it too. Phones lowered, whispers softened. He didn't cross the floor toward Daniel. He simply stood beside the nearest painting, presence alone, resetting the balance. Nia drew a breath, smoothed her dress, and turned to face the largest canvas in the room. A 17th-century restoration she'd fought 3 committees to include. She began to speak, voice steady, explaining pigment layering, lost signatures, forgotten women artists who'd never been named on plaques. Her words poured like silk over the noise, reshaping the narrative midair. The same donors who had doubted her now leaned forward, captivated. Even Daniel stopped pretending not to listen. When she finished, the gallery broke into applause, polite but genuine. A young journalist whispered, "She owned that." And somewhere in the back, Alessandro exhaled slowly, as if confirming something he already knew. Nia felt her pulse settle, 1 beat slower, grounded again. But as the applause faded, a thin, cutting whisper rose near the exit. "Curator or ornament?" It wasn't loud, but it landed like glass shattering. Every eye flicked toward her, waiting. She smiled, small and sharp. "Ornament," she said softly. "Darling, I built the frame." The silence that followed was worth every bruise ambition had ever given her. Then the cameras flashed again. Different energy now. Admiration disguised as curiosity. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Daniel slip toward the door, face pale. And beside him, Alessandro's security discreetly cleared a path. As Nia turned back to the paintings, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Enjoy the spotlight while it lasts." Her grip tightened. Tonight's battle was public. The next one, she knew, wouldn't be. Morning sunlight slid between half-closed shutters, turning the villa's marble floor into stripes of gold. For the first time in weeks, Nia's reflection looked like a stranger. Flawless makeup gone, her expression stripped of gallery polish. On the table lay her buzzing phone, still showing the last message. "Enjoy the spotlight while it lasts." Her thumb hovered, but she didn't reply. There was nothing to say to a threat that hid behind admiration. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled of espresso and newspapers. Her father sat at the counter, glasses low on his nose, reading the Italian headlines with a quiet sigh. He was visiting for the exhibition week, retired professor, lifelong realist. "They're calling you the curator who silenced a room," he said without looking up. "Sounds nicer than it felt," she murmured. He folded the paper. "Success makes noise. But noise doesn't mean safety. She smiled faintly. You think I can't handle whispers? I think the world handles women like you poorly, he said gently, especially when power pretends to protect them. Before she could answer, footsteps echoed down the hall, measured, unhurried. Alessandro appeared, in the doorway, jacket over his arm, his usual stillness muted by fatigue. I hope I'm not intruding, he said. Her father stood, polite but wary. You're early. I read threats before breakfast, Alessandro said. I don't like them directed at people under my name. Nia stiffened. Under your name? He caught the tone, paused. Forgive me. Wrong phrasing. You don't need to protect me, she said. You need to let me breathe. He nodded slowly, then placed a folded sheet of paper on the table. A printed email. Gallery Board notice. Pending review of your affiliations, the museum requests temporary suspension of your media privileges. Nia's chest tightened. They're serious. They're cautious, her father said. Caution is what power calls fear. Alessandro's voice was lower now. I can make this disappear. She shook her head. No, that would only prove their point. He studied her a moment longer, then leaned against the counter. I promise not to interfere, he said. But if they move against you, I will act. Nia met his gaze. Act by my rules, then. A small silence bloomed, the kind that feels like a contract. Her father poured coffee into 3 cups, breaking the moment softly. When I was your age, he said to her, we marched for independence. You'll have to curate yours. Nia laughed under her breath. Seems independence always needs good lighting. Alessandro looked toward the window where sunlight painted the city rooftops. Then we'll find a brighter frame, he said quietly. Her phone chimed again, this time from her assistant. Board meeting moved to noon. Agenda. Leadership ethics. She exhaled slowly. They want a show. Then give them one, her father said. But remember, child, the crowd only thinks it's the audience. It's really the art. Nia slipped her badge around her neck, straightened her shoulders, and reached for her coat. Then let's make them look twice. As she opened the door to leave, Alessandro's voice followed her. Nia, if they question your loyalty, what will you tell them? She didn't turn back. That loyalty works both ways, she said, and stepped into the light. The boardroom smelled of polish and pretense. Sunlight knifed through high windows, glinting off glass tables and silver pens. 10 trustees sat in a neat row, each pretending to represent reason while protecting reputation. At the end of the table, Nia Ellis placed her folder down carefully, not shaking, not smiling. The room expected her to flinch. The chairwoman began. Miss Ellis, we appreciate your contributions, but recent media attention around your associations has caused unease. Nia nodded once. You mean the sponsor who funds half your exhibitions? A few heads shifted uncomfortably. It's not personal, another trustee said quickly. Merely procedural. Nia glanced around the table. At men who'd once asked her to fetch catalog notes. At women who'd congratulated her with faint surprise. Procedures, she said, don't question influence unless that influence belongs to someone they fear. Silence spread like a slow tide. A projector flickered to life, showing headlines on the wall. Mafia ties alleged. Curator's credibility in doubt. She didn't flinch. You want me to choose between truth and appearance? We want stability, the chairwoman replied. Stability never restored a masterpiece, Nia said. Transparency did. She opened her folder. Inside were printed reports, loan records, funding sources, full provenance logs. I've documented every transaction, every shipment, every restoration hour, she said. If influence scares you, let honesty protect you. The room shifted again, eyes darting to the data. She had just taken away their leverage, made herself impossible to dismiss without proof. Behind the glass partition, Alessandro Russo watched quietly. His team waited for a signal, the unspoken permission to fix things. He gave none. For once, power chose stillness. The chairwoman finally cleared her throat. "You realize, Miss Ellis, you're forcing us to publish these records?" Nia's expression softened. "I prefer my truth to travel faster than my rumors." A small laugh escaped one of the younger trustees, quickly hidden behind a cough. Nia gathered her folder, stood tall, and looked at them one last time. "If you remove me, you admit this museum bows to fear. If you keep me, you prove it remembers courage." No one moved, no one dared. Then the chairwoman leaned forward slowly. "Miss Ellis," she said, "the board thanks you for your clarity." That was the closest thing to surrender she'd ever heard from this room. As Nia left, her assistant handed her a phone. A notification blinked, a breaking news alert. Gallery board reaffirms support for curator Nia Ellis after transparency proposal. Outside on the steps, Alessandro waited. "Impressive," he said. She adjusted her scarf. "You stayed out. You told me to." "And it worked," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. He looked past her to the reporters gathering across the street. "They'll ask if I pulled strings," he said. She met his gaze. "Then tell them the truth." "And what's that?" "That power learned manners." A courier approached with an envelope, embossed seal, museum crest. Nia opened it. Inside, a velvet box, and a note that read, "On your terms." Her heart paused mid-beat. She looked up. Alessandro was already walking away. The velvet box felt heavier than it should, not for what it contained, but for what it implied. Nia turned it over in her hands as city lights flickered beyond the tall villa windows. Outside, Milan buzzed with whispers. She couldn't hear, but could already predict. She opened it slowly. An emerald ring, simple and deliberate. No flourish, no diamonds, just clarity. Inside the lid, a small folded note. "Your terms." A knock sounded. When she turned, Alessandro Russo was in the doorway, still in his suit, jacket undone, eyes calmer than they had ever been. "I didn't expect you so soon," she said. "I didn't expect you to accept the box," he replied. "I haven't," she said quietly. He nodded. "Then consider this a draft." He stepped closer, not imposing, just present, the space between them filled with everything unsaid since the gallery night. "I didn't send the message," he said finally. "The threat, the leak, it wasn't mine." "I know," she replied, "but it's the world you live in, and the world I work in doesn't forgive shadows." He took a breath. "Then let's try something different." Nia raised an eyebrow. "Different?" "Transparency. You set the rules. I follow them." She almost laughed, a quiet, disbelieving sound. "Since when does power ask for permission?" "Since it realized control doesn't build trust," he said. She walked toward the glass window overlooking the city. Her reflection hovered beside his, light and shadow in one frame. "Then listen carefully," she said, voice steady. "I don't belong to anyone's narrative. Not the papers, not the board, not yours. If we build something, it happens my way." He nodded. "Then tell me your way." She turned, finally meeting his eyes. "First, my work stays mine. You don't appear in articles or funding documents. I earned my name without you, and it stays that way. Second, no intervention, no favors. When people doubt me, I'll answer with facts, not power. And third, I won't be protected. I'll be respected." He said nothing for a long moment. Then he smiled, small, precise. "You ask for what most people are too afraid to demand." "I've spent a lifetime being underestimated," she said. "Fear stopped working years ago." He stepped forward, slow enough to feel safe. "Then the answer's yes," he said softly. "To what?" "To all three." She studied his face. The man who could silence rooms with a look now waiting quietly for hers. Power had learned pause. She closed the box and handed it back to him. "I'll wear it," she said, "when the story fits the truth." "And when will that be?" "When the world stops calling me someone's +1. He nodded once, a gesture of understanding, not defeat. "Then we'll wait," he said. Outside, church bells struck midnight, 12 chimes echoing across rooftops. Somewhere far below, photographers waited for a picture that wouldn't come. Inside, the woman they'd called a borrowed name had just rewritten the contract of power. As he left, the ring remained on the table, still inside its box, but glowing faintly in the lamplight. It wasn't a promise yet. It was permission earned. Morning light poured through the museum's tall windows, painting long bars of gold across the marble. Reporters filled the atrium, cameras perched on shoulders, microphones raised like impatient birds. At the center of it all stood Nia Ellis, immaculate in a white silk blouse and steady calm. The same woman who'd once stood invisible in other people's rooms, now commanding her own. Behind her hung a banner for the museum's newest initiative, the Open Frame Project. No donors listed, no sponsors displayed. Just one purpose: masterworks traveling to public schools across Italy. For the first time, art would belong to everyone, not just the powerful. "Miss Ellis," a journalist called out, "is it true your proposal replaces half of the private lenders?" Nia met the question head-on. "It replaces secrecy with transparency. The lenders remain, only their names stay anonymous. The art speaks first." Flashes went off. The crowd murmured. She felt her pulse, but not her fear. From the balcony above, Alessandro Russo watched silently, dressed in a gray coat instead of black, blending for once into the crowd. No entourage, no spotlight, only distance and quiet pride. When their eyes met for a fraction of a second, the exchange said everything. "This is what your terms look like." Her father stood near the back, camera phone shaky, smiling like he'd never been prouder. He mouthed the same words he'd said the morning of the board meeting: "Curate your freedom." And now she had. The event wrapped with applause that felt different from the usual polite clapping of patrons. It was lighter, freer, honest. As staff began clearing the stage, Nia walked toward the exit, heels echoing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Outside, the sky over Milan was pale and soft, rain still drying on cobblestones. Her assistant hurried beside her. "The press wants a quote for the engagement rumors," she said. Nia smiled. "Tell them I'm committed to clarity." They both laughed. At the curb, a black car waited with the familiar driver. The rear door opened, but Alessandro didn't step out. Instead, a small envelope lay on the seat. Inside, the emerald ring, no longer boxed, glinting in natural light. Beneath it, a handwritten line: "For when the story belongs to you." She held it for a moment, feeling its weight shift. No longer a symbol of claim, but of respect freely given. She closed her fingers around it and slipped it into her pocket, not her hand. Legacy before romance, meaning before title. As she crossed the street, church bells began to ring. The wind caught the hem of her coat, carrying the faint scent of varnish and rain. She looked up toward the museum facade, her name on the banner fluttering above the entrance. It no longer surprised her. It just felt right. Because for the first time, the woman who'd been questioned, whispered about, and framed by others had built a frame no one could hang her inside of. Some stories don't need permission. They just need light.